Welcome to yet another episode of the Birding Diaries. We bring you a special edition from the Bird Fair recently that was held at the Birdlife offices. Just before we continue, I just want to ask all of you that enjoy our channel to please subscribe, hit the notifications bell. Your subscriptions and your following our channel really helps grow the channel. And yes, I'm Doug Newman.
My name is Mongez Mtati, and as Doug mentioned, we talked to a couple of people from Birdlife in this special edition from the Bird Fair, which is the first one since lockdown, the first in-person Bird Fair since lockdown. Stay tuned to the end of this episode where we talk to Roger from Canon about their special new toys.
Yes, and the chat with Roger was really impressive. He goes through a lot of their equipment and what the options are for birders wanting to get into photography and using their existing lenses on the new mirrorless bodies and so on. So if that interests you and you are looking at getting into or have been an avid bird photographer, honestly stay tuned, listen right to the end of the episode, as there's some awesome stuff he has to say about their new gear. But to start off with, we had a chat with Sandiswa Kula from the Eastern Cape. And she is an emerging birding enthusiast who's been quite active on social media and has rocketed to fame, developing quite a following. So yeah, let's have a listen to what she has to say.
So I'm sitting here with an avid photographer, someone who describes herself on Instagram as an aspiring birder, but actually an aspiring photographer rather. But actually you have some of the most amazing bird photos that I've seen on Instagram. Sandiswa Kula, thank you for making the time to chat with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Sandiswa, I think to start off, how did you get into birding?
It was by mistake because I was a plant person to begin with. I worked at a botanical garden and I was surrounded by plants everywhere. And I was taking pictures of an aloe. And the next thing I know, there was a sunbird on it. I was like, oh, that's a nice picture.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, it's just birds and the plants were forgotten. But then somewhere along the line, birds took over everything and I've been happier.
Yeah. How do you find the inclusivity of birding coming from an area like the Eastern Cape that isn't seen as a major birding center?
Funny enough, I've had to learn that you just have to look around to actually realize that everywhere is a birding center. It's just that we overlook a lot of things because people want to go to a reserve to see it. People want to go to, but just your garden, because that's how I started with lockdown.
Right.
Because my outside garden was the only place I could go to. And the next thing I know, I got 20 birds in my garden. I was like, but then neighbor's garden, the neighbor's garden. Next thing you knew, I had 100 birds in the village. And now it's just been amazing. And you just have to actually pay attention to where you are and you have birding.
That's true. And it's a very interesting way, I think, of starting, referring to the fact that there's a lot in your garden and next door to you that's very close by without you having to drive
anywhere, use petrol, with the prices. So you just have to actually wake up earlier than usual if you're not a morning person like me. I've had to learn to be a morning person because the one time I took a picture of a bokmakir at like 5:05 in the morning, I think. And it was summertime, already the sun is out at that time in summer.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that call? And next thing I know, it's a bokmakeri, and it's closer, they call it ingwangi. It makes the beautiful sound, but I didn't know it was there until I actually paid attention to it, and it was just outside my house. So you just have to pay attention, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't even have to have the camera. Just listen, you'll find it.
It's interesting that you mention the Bokmakeri's name in Xhosa there. How important is it for us to know, especially bird names and bird calls in various languages, in order for us to make birding more accessible to people?
The thing is this, I always say to people, whoever ask about the fact that I give the Xhosa name as well, I never knew that I knew the birds because I would know the name from if my brother was talking about something, my uncles were talking about ehem, for example, which is a great crowned crane. Saying that is a lot. But I always knew of a bird called ehem, but I didn't know how it looked. I didn't know that you could find it in the village. But the fact that they could speak about it and I go and look it up, I'm like, oh, but it's something I already know. But because at school and varsity, you taught it in English, which is good because it's universal.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, ndingumXhosa.
Yes.
And I need to know things in my language before I can teach anyone else it. So it's easy for me to learn as well because it's the first thing I hear in the morning. And for you, if you're Zulu or anyone who's Tswana, that's the first thing you hear in the morning.
Yes.
So if you know it in your language, it's easy to teach someone else, and someone else gets taught something new, but they already knew.
Yes.
Do you
yes.
get me?
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's like it's always been there. I've kind of always knew it, but I didn't know that this is it's what was called in my language and in English, for instance.
Exactly.
How do you feel the birding community can be more welcoming and open to people exploring birding as a hobby?
I think it already is. We just don't know that it is. For me personally, I
Yes.
didn't realize that there's so many people who would enjoy birding from my point of view, because I personally always looked at it as a white person thing,
Yes.
elderly person thing,
Yes.
male person thing. But the moment I got out of my own head and was like, okay, this is just an owl that I saw. This is a sparrow that I saw. People were like, oh, but I saw that in my backyard as well.
Yes.
But now, because no one is sharing with each other, you think that it's just a Sandiswa thing.
Yes,
But the
yes.
moment you put Sandiswa with Doug, with you,
Yeah.
with an Andrew, whoever, they'll be like, no, but then we saw that here. You make friends, you make links that if you just get outside of your head, then we all, end of the day, we're enjoying the same thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. And I think it's very important. I think this sense of camaraderie and of course, interacting and engaging with
Yeah.
other birders. What have been some of your highlights as a birder?
This. I've done radio, I've done TV, but I think it's meeting people who accept me. And it's going to sound like I'm not happy with where I am currently in the village, but I've gotten more acceptance with being me
Yes.
outside of the village. Do
Yeah.
you get me? Because people
Yeah.
think I'm crazy. Like, we can be a crazy bunch when we're looking for
Yes.
that one
Yes.
picture or that one ID, that one sighting.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, meeting the same-minded people who actually share the same craziness.
Absolutely.
It's that thing of I'm not alone. And it doesn't even have to be a sentimental thing or a financial thing or a job-wise thing. It's the fact that I can be myself and not apologize for enjoying what I enjoy.
So-
and I
so
found
this-
it
yeah.
outside of where I grew up.
So this sense of, I would
Oneness.
almost describe it as community.
Yes, that
A
sense of oneness.
Yes.
Of we enjoy the same thing. Why not share the fact that we enjoy it?
How do you think, you've already mentioned looking around where you are, you've already mentioned trying to listen out for a call in your own garden, you've already mentioned some of these things of just starting where you are. But how else do you think birders can improve from being beginners to growing within the birding community?
Investing, as much as jobs are not great at the moment, it's investing in the equipment. It doesn't have to be a camera, just a bird book, because some are 200-300 secondhand.
Yes.
And the bird names, maybe some have changed, but at least you have an ID and a name. So
Okay.
if you save up for 200 rands or 300 rands to get a bird book, you can see this bird all the time at home. And then when you have an idea of it, you don't have to take a picture if you don't have the camera.
Yes.
So investing in it makes you grow and gives you that confidence of saying, I can take my book to the wild and for sure I'll see 10 birds, for sure. You just have to make sure that you write down, you make a note of it, even if you don't. For me, for example, in the beginning, I didn't have a camera.
Yes.
So I walked around and I was happy enough and lucky enough to work in a bookstore, close to a bookstore. So I could take a book and be like, oh, I saw this bird, go and bookmark it there, and then later on go and find the information. But because I was lucky to get the bookshop close by, for someone who doesn't have that, you can just have to invest in it.
Yeah.
And when you start, I'm telling you, you won't go back.
So for everybody at home, advise them to move close to a bookshop.
There's always a bookshop somewhere. There's a library. I'm sure the library has a book somewhere. But that's the first part, because if you don't know how to ID a bird, you won't pay attention to anything because you're like, that brown bird
Yeah.
or that yellow one. But how many yellow birds are there? But if you can ID it down to maybe there's 3 different yellow birds that grow around the Eastern Cape, for example,
Yes.
then you narrow down and be like, I can't wait to actually ID it. So your
Yes.
curiosity is being, because now you have a point of reference.
Yeah.
But if you have nothing at all, you're not going to grow because there's nothing for you to push you
Absolutely.
to actually go anywhere with
Yeah,
it.
yeah. In your intro, I mentioned that you are an avid bird photographer, of course, a birder. And I've seen some of your pictures, really amazing work.
Thank you.
How have you found social media to be useful for you as a birder, and how can other people utilize social media as a platform or a series of platforms in their journey?
I don't like social media all the time.
Sure.
But I've had to learn to navigate it so that it makes my life easier. Because I take sabbaticals from it for like two months, 3 months, and I'm not available. But I make it a point that I post something and be like, okay, I went out birding. Here's a picture from this last Sunday.
Yeah.
I won't be available for wherever. So you need to consciously make a decision to say, I'm going to use it for this.
Yes.
And if it's too much for me, make a plan, because you can't force yourself to enjoy social media if you don't, which is me.
Right.
In the beginning, I took a full year. People thought I was no more. But I had to go and be like, people, I'm not okay. So let me just, but I'll post pictures.
Step back.
So
True.
you have to make a conscious decision. You say, okay, this is the first way for me to get my work out there. And it's the only one that's affordable at the moment, because we can't all advertise wherever.
Yes.
But we have social media platforms like Facebook and wherever. So if you make a conscious decision to say, okay, this is the only marketing I have for myself, it's a business. It's my brand.
Yes.
So you have to make a decision to say, I am going to enlarge my audience using this, and that's all I'm going to focus on, and leave all the other stuff that's not going to be good for your brand at the end of the day.
That's actually really great advice, because what I've found on social media is that, of course, I follow a lot of birding, a lot of birders, wildlife photographers. I find that some of the biggest communities in birding would just post a picture of a bird and just say beautiful bird without an ID, without mentioning what it is, and that, I think, is one of those things that I've found. In closing, what advice would you offer beginner birders who are starting out and who want to improve their experience, especially in areas where birding isn't prevalent?
Just do it. Because you can't start if you don't walk around your house. You can hear it if you're sitting and watching TV, but the TV is gonna drown out what you would have heard if you were actually in your veranda. When you get to the veranda, get out of the gate.
Yes.
Even if you're scared, you're gonna say something under the tree next door. And I can bet my chocolate addiction. If you start, you will not stop. That's how I started, because it was just a thing of, plants are outside. Next thing I know, there's a bird on a plant.
Right.
Next thing I knew was like, I have to go outside, because now I can't see them inside the office.
Yes.
You just have to get out. Everything else is going to fall into place.
Sandy Swakula, thank you very much for your
me.
time. So basically, start where you are, start with what you have. Listen, it's not always about having the fancy equipment. It's really about the interest and the curiosity.
And being present.
Absolutely.
Everything else will work itself out.
Thank you. Thanks,
Pleasure.
Sandy. That was Sandy Swakula, who describes herself as a birding enthusiast and a bird photographer.
Yeah, I have to be honest, advanced as I am personally as a birder, and by no means am I one at the top, but I've certainly got a wide range of birding experience, I still felt quite inspired by her growth and her talking about developing one's skills. So I'm definitely going to continue pursuing building my own personal knowledge and my skill base. So yeah, she was quite an inspiring person to listen to.
I also find it interesting that she brings it back to her home language and talks to bird names in her language, and finds it important, as we all do, to know what birds are or bird names in our language, and understanding IDs, as well as just putting away the fancy equipment. And up next, we talk to Mark Anderson, the CEO of Birdlife, about what Birdlife means, their conservation efforts, and how you, whether you are a birder or an enthusiast or somebody who's just interested in birds, can support the cause of Birdlife. Congratulations on yet another successful in-person bird fair. We're sitting here with the CEO of Birdlife South Africa, Mark Anderson. Mark, thank you for making the time.
It's a pleasure.
How long has the bird fair been running, and what sort of value as an event and as a fair does it offer both serious and beginner birders?
Okay, so the event's been running for about 15 years. And it was always an in-person event. So initially at the Johannesburg Zoo, and then we moved to Walter Sisulu National Botanical Gardens probably 6 years ago or so. And then with COVID, we had to make a decision because it's a lot of planning goes into an event like this.
Yes.
And we thought we can't take the risk of putting a lot of effort into having an in-person event, and then the COVID restrictions and regulations wouldn't allow us to do so. So 2 years ago, we had a virtual event. We decided last year to hold a virtual event again. But as things are now changing and regulations are less stringent, we've decided this year to have a hybrid event. And that is so mainly virtual, and it's presentations from people around Africa, and we've got participation, attendance from people around the world, in fact. So and it's the difficult decision is what are we going to do going forward?
Yes.
Whether we continue with a hybrid event or whether we go back to the in-person events. But the value, I mean, that's a really good question to ask. The value of an event like this. There's several things that we try to achieve. One of them is to create awareness about birds,
Right.
bird conservation, and our organisation. So
Yes.
that's important. And with a hybrid event, with a virtual event, we can have speakers from across the world. So we had an interview last night with Jonathan Franzen, the famous novelist, who happens to be a good and top bird watcher. And then we've had people from other BirdLife partners in Africa speaking at the event. We've got attendees from around the world. So we can, we open up an event to many more people. Not just restricted to Gauteng if it is virtual.
Yes.
So awareness is an important part of it. And secondly, it's also a fundraiser. Now, a lot of effort goes into organising an event like this, and you will not believe how hard the team has worked. They've worked exceptionally hard. And these are people that have other jobs.
Yes.
So we have one events person, but there's a lot of people involved in organising an event like this.
Yeah, you have all hands on deck when something like this is coming up.
Absolutely, all hands on deck. And so we're trying to raise some money for our work, and it's it's not easy running a donor-funded conservation NGO.
This is true.
Because you've got to raise all of that funding from somewhere. An event like this does bring in some funding. So it's there's multiple aims. I do believe we achieve all of them, and because we have an in-person event as well this year, and we've opened up our offices in Dunkeld, West Johannesburg, to people from the surrounding suburbs and from Joburg, and I see some have even come from further. We can engage with them as well. And I've spent most of the morning so far just chatting to people that I don't always get to see very often. So there's multiple reasons why we have these bird fairs.
So with the success of the virtual event and now coming in and doing a more hybrid model, do you think that you'll continue with the hybrid model since, as you've just described, it provides access to people outside of just Gauteng and outside of just people who are able to come to Joburg, but across the continent and be able to engage with other BirdLife members or other BirdLife, I suppose, organizations outside of South Africa itself. So it creates this network. Do you think it's something that you'll grow on?
Yeah, and that's, I think COVID, we've learned so much. I mean, we have these weekly webinars, conservation conversations. We have, we've done over 100. We've had 500 to 1,000 people join us every Tuesday night.
Right.
So, and I was in Kruger Park in the last week, and when I arrived at Auckland Gate and we went and checked in, I went back to the car. There were 8 ladies standing at the car, which I got a branded car, waiting to talk to me. And what do they want to tell me is how our conservation conversations webinars was the highlight of lockdown for them. So they could sit in their homes when they're not able to go out and actually still, they weren't able to attend bird club meetings, but they were able to still have that stimulation from people who are knowledgeable about birds.
Yes.
So once this event is over, we'll have a debriefing. We'll have the debriefing in the next week or 10 days. And a decision will have to be made. Do we continue having virtual activities? Do we have a hybrid event? And I think there's a need for it because we can open it up to people from outside Joburg. Our annual general meetings the last few years have also been virtual. So we had our third successive virtual AGM in May. And after the AGM, I had a number of our members email me and phone me and see me and say, listen, please continue like this because we'd like to attend the AGM, but we can't always attend in person. So this is a way I think we're going to do things in future. And also, the other thing is you can record.
Yes.
So, every talk at the bird fair has been recorded and can be made available later. And the conservation conversations webinars, we've had over 100. And so bird clubs love presentations, and they're not always able to get somebody from other part of South Africa to come and speak to their members. But there's now a repository of all of these talks on YouTube, on the Birdlife South Africa YouTube channel, which are available. And bird clubs may struggle to get a speaker, but they could then play a recording of one of our presentations.
Birdlife South Africa took over the long-standing Africa Birds and Birding magazine. How has it been received, and what has been the success since that rebranding?
Yeah, so we had to make an important decision when Africa Geographic decided to close down Africa Birds and Birding. We had an agreement with our members to provide them with a magazine. So very quickly we had to decide whether we're going to produce a magazine or not. And for me it was essential that we have to do so. And so the board met and made that decision, and it was hard work for the first few months because I was actually on holiday for 2 weeks in the Lowveld, and I was thinking about names, registering the trademark of that name, ISSN numbers, who's going to edit, who's going to print. And we've been producing the magazine for about 8 years now, and it's been a wonderful success. I mean, it's widely regarded as one of the world's best bird and birding magazines. And I, for example, have taken the magazine to the British Bird Fair and had stands there, also trying to promote the digital version. And people love the magazine. So it has been a wonderful success. And the magazine has one aim, because we don't make any money from the magazine, and that is to raise awareness about birds. And most of the content, if not all the content, is original. It's printed in quality paper. It's, we'll never reduce the number of pages in the magazine. And we have really amazing contributions. The current issue as well, which is superb, it's a visual issue, is fantastic. So as long as I'm around, we will continue to produce a magazine like this.
With things going more and more digital, especially with in the print space, are you thinking of perhaps also going digital with the magazine?
So it is available digitally, only as a PDF for both Android and Apple devices. And we do sell a number of digital magazines, electronic magazines, but people aren't interested in it for some reason. So we sell a few hundred, whereas the print magazine we sell thousands, and they obviously also as a membership benefit, available as a membership benefit. And I don't understand that, but I think it's a quality magazine people like to hold in their hands.
Yes.
And Jonathan Franzen, who we interviewed last night, is one of the world's top novelists. He was talking about digital books, these e-books, and he said he likes to feel the paper in his hands as well.
Yeah, there's nothing like that, like that smell and feel of something you're reading.
And this magazine, because a lot of it is about the natural history of the bird, it's biology, it's ecology, it fits in the environment, beautiful photographs. It doesn't date. So, we have, people collect them, and I've been in homes where I see the pride and joy of the birder, and they're on the shelf in their homes, and sometimes they're missing an issue, or they've spilled coffee on an issue, and they come to us. We keep a supply of back issues as well, and we can then provide them with that back issue. So because it doesn't date, you can go back and you can read a magazine from 10 years ago, and it still largely remains relevant today.
That's true, yeah. If you had to highlight one conservation project that represents what Birdlife South Africa is all about, what would that be?
Well, let me highlight two.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
So, one of them, and Doug would know about it, is we worked with fisheries to address the problem of accidental, inadvertent mortalities of albatrosses and petrels in both the trawl fishery and the longline fishery. And through simple mitigation measures in the trawl fishery, for example, which is the hake fishery, in South African waters, we were able to reduce the fatalities of albatrosses from about 8,000 dead albatrosses a year to about 100 dead albatrosses a year consistently over the last decade. So that's a success. Now that's part of the success. Another success is what we use is something called Tory lines. It's just a cable off the back of the ship, either side of the net. From that we hang streamers, and the albatrosses don't fly into that area. So they're not able to fly into the cables and the nets and get entangled and drown. But we have a community called the Ocean View Association for Persons with Disabilities. It's a place called Ocean View, not far from Cape Town. They manufacture these mitigation devices that we sell to the fisheries. So people, some of them quite disadvantaged, are actually benefiting from these from this project. So it's a win-win, And the longline fishery, because longlines there is the longline fishermen, which is the tuna fishery mainly, they bait hooks And the idea with the baited hook is a tuna would come and grab on that baited hook and you'll be able to catch it. You don't want a bird on that hook, you'd rather have a tuna on the hook.
Right.
So we're able to cooperate with them. So the fisheries benefit, birds benefit, and communities benefit. So that's one of the projects. The other, and there's many, I think, important contributions we've made. One of them is we've trained over 200 community bird guides around the country.
Okay.
And at least 50 of them are doing really well as bird guides. They are knowledgeable. In fact, there's 2 of them on Wild Earth vehicles today being streamed to the world, and they're driving around on these open vehicles, one in Sabi Sand, one in the Eastern Cape, telling the viewers about birds. And this is an incredible success. And we're taking this project a step forward now as well, because these guys make a living from, and girls, make a living from guiding today, and some of them are making, I think, a reasonable living. But there's times that they're not guiding, and we want them to now get more involved in, creating awareness about birds and the environment in their communities, because they're ambassadors for nature and they're knowledgeable, they're brilliant, they're incredibly knowledgeable. So that's the next step, is how do we upskill them and provide them with the resources and the means to work with the communities through education, working with schools and other people to create awareness about birds and the environment and ultimately contribute to conservation.
And I think very importantly, I think on the guys themselves, with there being 200, even though 50 are really doing well, the fact that you have more and more people in communities aware of birds is very important towards your conservation efforts as well.
Yeah. And absolutely, and they know about birds. Everybody who's gone through the courses now know a bit more about birds and become ambassadors for birds. But a lot of them that aren't guiding today, and I know quite a few of them, have actually obtained other employment elsewhere, which I don't believe they would have necessarily obtained unless they had this qualification with us.
Yeah, that's amazing. With Birding Big Day happening in December this year, firstly, are you personally participating, and why should birders participate?
I do participate. My wife and I participate. We don't go big, and try and see how many birds we see. We're generally fairly low-key in our suburb, in our garden. I do spend most of the day on the internet encouraging others, keeping tabs of how people are doing.
Yeah.
So, and when I lived in Kimberley for a long time, we participated seriously. And one year we got more than 200 species, which wasn't bad for the Northern Cape. But yeah, Birding Big Day is an important event for us. A lot of people take it very seriously. And it's just a day to create awareness about birds. I mean, we get queries long in advance. What date is it this year?
Yeah.
Are you changing the rules? And what are the prizes as well? So, and we do raise money from Birding Big Day, but we've done over 30, I think. So it's an important annual event.
Mm-hmm. So I consider myself a hobbyist or a birding enthusiast, right? How do you feel Birdlife South Africa is relevant to the non-birder who has an interest in birds?
That's a really good, important question. And it's a big challenge that we face, because birders traditionally have been middle-class, white, elderly South Africans. And that's not the demographic we want. We would like to be relevant to everybody. So we have an Empowering People program now. We're doing work with the guides. We're doing education work as well. Our new communication and marketing strategy is specifically about how we change our demographic, our supporters. And so we're going to be trying to become more relevant to all South Africans, for them to understand not only that bird watching is a fun pastime and one that we encourage people to do, because it gets particularly kids away from their computers.
Yes.
But also, gets you active, it gets you outdoors, and there's an environment that you can be exposed to. And by conserving birds as well, you're looking after the environment, and that environment provides us with clean water and clean air, on which we're dependent. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be doing a lot going forward. In fact, we've got billboards in and around Gauteng at the moment, which is it's a whole compilation of birds making up the South African flag, different color birds making up the flag, and we've got those billboards in isiZulu as well as in English. And our Bird of the Year lesson plans now we translate into isiXhosa and to isiZulu and to Afrikaans as well. So we've identified it as one of our absolute priorities to be more accessible to all South Africans.
Yes.
And also to try and garner support amongst everybody.
Yeah.
Because we're not an exclusive organisation. We can't just be it can't just be a certain sector of society that is a birder or supportive of Birdlife South Africa. What's encouraging, I was in Kruger last week, is that if you drive around now, you'll see that there's people from all demographics. I mean, there's young people, old people, black people, white people. which is really encouraging to see, because it's all South Africans' natural heritage.
Yeah.
And we all have a responsibility to enjoy it and to protect it.
So if anyone is still unconvinced at this point that they should join, why they should join Birdlife South Africa, can you talk us through why it's important for people to join and what benefit there is in them joining?
So there's lots of reasons why it is important for them to join. I mean, one is that we are a conservation organisation, so our work is to conserve South Africa's birds and also to monitor them. We work collaboratively with other organisations to monitor them, and birds are those canaries in the coal mine. When we see declines in populations and disappearance of species, we know that there's problems in the environment. And if those problems are affecting birds, they're going to affect us ultimately as well. So it's important to monitor them and to conserve them. If they're there and they're present and they're thriving, we know that the environment is healthy, and that obviously then has benefits to us as humans. So that's one of the reasons. And birds have an important role to play. They fulfill ecological functions. I mean, simple one is they're pollinators of plants. Many birds are pollinators of plants. They control rodents. I mean, owls control rodents. So there's many important reasons why birds should be conserved. Jonathan Franzen, I'm referring to him again, he wrote there's an edition of National Geographic 2018, and it's called Why Birds Matter. And he wrote very eloquently why birds matter, why it's important to conserve birds. And anybody who reads that would be convinced of why we need to conserve birds. And the other thing is that, what sort of environment do we want to leave future generations? I woke this morning quite early, thinking about the day ahead. And as I always do, listening to the dawn chorus. There's not much of a dawn chorus now because it's still winter. And I was listening to a pair of Cape sparrows. They're usually the first to call in our garden. And when I lie there literally every morning, I always think, now, would I like to bequeath a silent dawn to future generations? My children and their children and their children's children. Are we going to leave them an environment which is devoid of bird song? That would be a horrible indictment on us as the current generation, that we leave to future generations an environment which is devoid of other life. That would be terrible. So people who support Birdlife South Africa support our conservation work, and I mentioned the albatross work, but we do a multitude of projects, on a variety of species. But there are obviously other benefits of becoming a member of Birdlife South Africa, and one of them is you get 6 issues a year of one of the world's best bird and birding magazines, I think. And we have lots of activities, and we've got the bird fair this weekend. Earlier this year we took 1,500 birders to the Southern Ocean, Marion Island. We're going up the Mozambique Channel next year, end of next year, and we work hard to organise these trips, these expeditions. So there's lots of benefits of being a member of an organisation like ours.
In closing, aside from membership, how can companies and individuals help the conservation efforts of Birdlife South Africa?
Okay, so that's another really good and important question. So a lot of organisations, companies support work we do. We have companies that provide funding for positions at Birdlife South Africa or for projects, so that could be done. So that's the extreme. If somebody's got deep pockets and they're very passionate about bird conservation, that's what they could do. But people often ask me, they say, I don't have the resources to support you financially. What else could I do? And I say there's simple things you can do. You can talk favourably about Birdlife South Africa and the work we do. Learn a bit about the work we do and just tell people. That's one thing you could do. The other thing is every year we have a bird of the year. So the bird of the year this year is the Cape Gannet. We produce a poster which is distributed in the magazine. We develop lesson plans which are available on our website. You can get a pin badge, a T-shirt, and you can learn about that bird, and you can then make it your mission to teach people about the bird of the year every year. Buy them the pin badge. I often say when you're in the queue at Woolworths and you're wearing your bird of the year shirt and your pin, don't face the back of the person in front of you. Turn around and face the person behind you and point to the pin badge and say, what would you like to talk about? Tell them about bird of the year.
Yeah.
And the last thing that you could do, which is relatively simple, is when you go birding, take somebody with you. It could be a friend, a colleague, a neighbour, a niece, a nephew, a grandchild. Take them with. And get them excited about birds and the environment. Because birds open up our eyes to the natural environment. You can't get excited about the natural environment if you're looking at cockroaches that live under a rock. ultimately people who watch birds may be interested in insects and other invertebrates. But if you go out with somebody who is not exposed to the environment, you go out there and get excited about something that you see, and you know something about it, you open up the book and read there's some interesting facts about it, that passion could become could be contagious. And you could get them interested in the environment, and they may develop this hobby, interest in birds. But with an interest in the environment, you may find that they don't litter anymore. They think twice about throwing a piece of paper out the window.
Yeah.
They start recycling. They start eating organic foods. There could be all sorts of spin-offs for the environment if people have been exposed to nature and to birds, once through that little introduction, and it could ultimately be better for the planet.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark Anderson. I think I got a lot out of that. Of course, help the conservation efforts, take somebody out there with you, speak favorably about the work, and ultimately, I think the big one is, do you want to leave other generations with or without the song of birds in the morning when they wake up?
So that was an awesome interview with Mark Anderson, and he gave some amazing insights into probably the last 10 to 15 years history of BirdLife as an organization. Next up, we chat to Nandi Tobela. She runs the Empowering People program at BirdLife South Africa, which really looks at literally empowering people to generate revenue, jobs, etc. out of birding, and really make birding a local community financially sustainable exercise.
Thank you so much for making the time, Nandi. We're sitting here with Nandi Tobela, the manager of the Empowering People program at Birdlife South Africa. Nandi, tell us a little bit about what the Empowering People program is and what it does.
Okay, thank you, Mongezi. It's a new program in Birdlife South Africa that seeks to empower people through the conservation of biodiversity, using birds as a vehicle to bring that message.
Mm-hmm. And how is it being received in communities that you've interacted with?
We've had good reception so far, but as I mentioned, it's a new program that was structured into BirdLife South Africa last year.
Right.
And I joined the organization this year, heading up that program. But we had already existing projects within the Empowering People program, such as the Avitourism project, which is managed by Andrew de Blok. So coming into the space, we've identified areas where we'd like to work, and so far it's been okay. It's been good. We've had good reception.
That's amazing. I mean, because one of the I think very important things about this program, of course, is that besides making birding accessible, you want to make it a little bit more inclusive to various communities and go into those communities with conservation efforts, right? So it's positive that it's been received, I think, positively and well by communities themselves. What are some of the plans and ideas going forward in terms of increasing adoption?
Okay, so what you're saying is quite correct. Birding has always, or most of the time, traditionally been seen as a very specific niche market for a certain demographic, especially in South Africa.
Yes.
But through this program, we are wanting to make it accessible to all demographics and all, ages, that truly represent the rainbow nation that we are in South Africa. So, in one of the ways we've identified 3 focal points that we would like to focus on as a program. I've mentioned avitourism. That includes the training of community bird guides to a level that they are actually site guides and can do the guiding on their own. So it's a huge way to empower people from communities, and we don't employ the community bird guides. They work for themselves as entrepreneurs. And then over the time, we provide mentorship and support and opportunities and marketing for the bird guides. The other focal point we focus on is livelihoods. Sustainable livelihoods, to be correct, is one that links us to the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a national strategy for, in fact, an international strategy. So in that one, we focus on areas, communal areas. One that I can mention is such as Nsigeni community, which is a community in the southern part of KZN. where livestock grazing is a bit of an issue because of the deterioration of the veld in the communal areas.
Right.
And yeah, so to try and mitigate that so that, because as a result of that pressure, you find there's a lot of livestock grazing now in protected areas, which may be a conflict issue. So we try to mitigate areas like that and try to restore through the partnership with other organizations to restore that veld so that the livestock can thrive outside the protected areas and in the communal areas. So in that way it improves obviously the livelihoods of the community, and that also comes with other opportunities. And the last focal point in the program is environmental education. Now this is a fundamental aspect of conservation and empowering people. It may so happen that the reason why we don't maybe get the representation that we want in the avitourism space is because maybe people are not aware that there is such a thing called birding. There is such a, you can have a career even in conservation as a whole.
Right.
So we really want to get people interested, and we've identified that it is more strategic to get the children at the young age because they are the future, but it's more strategic to sow the seed and inspiration and inspire the kids to love nature, and in that way we hope that they will then follow the path that leads them to conservation and to appreciating and enjoying nature. So those are the three main focal programs that we focus on and focal areas in our program. Yeah.
So there are two things that you mentioned there which I'd like to loop back to, which I really like about this. And the one is what you're doing with the community of Ntigeni in KZN, and of course young people and getting young people involved. Because one of the things I think that I'm not seeing a lot of, and this might be because I myself am not involved, a lot on the coalface of the work that you do. What I'm not seeing a lot is how birding or the importance of birds is talked about at community level. Like you've just said, the fact that if a veld is damaged, of course it means there'll be an imbalance in the ecosystem or in the life there. How important is it for some of our communities, especially communities in outlying areas outside of cities, in spaces where they are herding their cows, or they have some cattle that graze in that sort of rural or farming community? How important is it for these kinds of efforts to go out there?
It's very important, Mongezi. You must remember, in these traditional communities that you speak about, birds in particular have always been an integral part of the Zulu culture that I can speak confidently about. And in terms of the language, in terms of the way of life, in terms of defining traditions and defining seasons, defining time in a day when we didn't have clocks and watches, we'd see the birds and we'd know what time, what to do. We look at migratory patterns of birds that would tell you winter's coming, or give an indication summer's coming when the birds return. So birds have always been intertwined in a cultural space and also in a way of life, like I'm saying. So it's very important to then re-emphasize that message. And if you go to these areas, most of the farmers will tell you themselves that, we used to see these birds and this would indicate, will give us an indication that we've got a good veld this year, or we'll get a good season, or we're going to get rain. That's how they would tell that they're going to get rain. And, some of them would also tell you that, the reason why we're struggling is because we don't see these birds anymore, these kinds of birds, that mention them. I just mentioned one bird they used to be able to tell the rain, the southern ground hornbill.
Yes,
which is called Ingodudu. So it's a very important message to them. And like I said, it's always nice to use birds because birds are a flagship species that indicate a lot of things, in the ecosystem.
Yeah. Nandi, thank you so much for your time and sharing the work that you do as the manager of the Empowering People program. And Yes, I think a lot of what you spoke to there resonates a lot with me. Nature conservation, understanding the importance of birds within an ecosystem, and the fact that birds have always been part of our lives in and outside of traditional communities. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
That was a great chat with Nandi Thobela. I like the fact that she talks about how well we should empower communities and empower people, not just to make revenue, but to understand their contribution in ecosystems that they live around and ecosystems that they live in, which contribute quite a lot to bird life.
Yeah, indeed. So next up, we have an interview with Andrew de Block, who runs a new exciting AV tourism initiative hosted by Birdlife on their website. We were in two minds whether to bring this interview or not because of Andrew himself. Brilliant interview, he had amazing stuff to say. We unfortunately had a slight technical issue with Mongezi's microphone, so his audio is not that great, but we honestly felt the value of what Andrew had to share was well worth putting the video in despite the not so great quality of Mongezi's mic, but you can still hear the questions, and Andrew's answers are well worth a listen to.
We're sitting with Andrew de Block, the AV Tourism Project Manager. Andrew, thank you for making the time.
Thank you.
With us. Andrew, I believe you are driving the new AV Tourism initiative for Birdlife South Africa. Can you tell us a little bit more about what AV tourism is and what the term means for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah, so AV tourism, put very simply, is just birding tourism. So any travel that's related to seeing birds in their natural habitat. And of course that has a domestic market in South Africa, quite a strong one, but there's also an international market of people coming from overseas to South Africa to see our birds, because South Africa has over 870 species. And that's about 8% of the world's total global diversity of birds, so pretty incredible for a single country at the tip of Africa. And we've also got nearly 70 birds that are found nowhere else in the world. So if you're an international birder, you have to come to South Africa to see our birds.
I recall that Birdlife South Africa used to have a travel project. How's this different from any other initiative rather that you've had it as Birdlife South Africa?
Yeah, so Birdlife's had an interest in AV tourism for over 20 years. That's when our first sort of forays into tourism happened. So we're a conservation NGO, so it's a bit of a mismatch with our core objectives. But the reason we are interested in AV tourism is not to make money out of AV tourism. We don't run tours. We don't, have any profit-driven motives. Actually, our AV tourism project is situated within our Empowering People program. So I think that speaks to the objectives. It's more about using birds and tourism to create opportunities for people to empower local communities, things like that.
Do you still have the Better Friendly Establishment project going?
We do. So it's been remodeled and rebranded. So we felt that Birder Friendly as a label was sort of a mismatch with what both parties were trying to get out of the deal. So it doesn't really also speak to the main reason that people want to sign up with Birdlife South Africa, which is the credibility of the Birdlife brand. People look up to Birdlife South Africa as the authority on birds and birding in South Africa, and so we've remodeled it now. It's the same idea. Accommodations can sign up to be recommended or vetted by Birdlife South Africa and then promoted to our members, but it's now called the Birdlife South Africa Recommended Accommodations Network. So similarly to the accommodations, we've also got recommended tour operators, so specialist birding guides, and we added last year recommended course providers. So people that want to learn about birds, we have specific course providers that we feel give quality courses, and we can refer them to those course providers, because that's not something that we actually do all that much ourselves.
And with the rebrand, what does it mean for a birder who's traveling? What services are offered?
Yeah, so it's the accommodations, tour operators and course providers. For birders that are out there, I think the main questions you want to answer is where do I want to go, where do I want to stay, and who's going to take me there? So the idea with those recommended networks of service providers are to find the best and most quality across South Africa that we can then put Birdlife South Africa's weight and brand behind for birders.
Right. How can service providers who are interested in getting involved sign up for this initiative?
Well, the easiest way is to just go straight through me. So to contact me, They can contact Birdlife on info@birdlife.org.za, but if they want my specific email address, it's andrew.deblock@birdlife.org.za, and that's Deblock spelled DEBLOCQ.
Right.
So a slightly different twist there.
Right, and are you available anywhere else, like the likes of LinkedIn and other spaces that people can get a hold of you besides emailing you?
Yeah, so I mean, Birdlife's on all the major social media channels: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. So if you just go through any of the Birdlife channels and say, I'd like to sign up as a recommended accommodation under Birdlife, they'll direct you towards me. So it's easy enough.
Okay. Is there a specific place to find out about the platform, or do you go through the website and find it there?
So you can go through the website, but the best way to do it is through our newly launched Go Birding website. So that's gobirding.co.za or gobirding.birdlife.org.za. This was a platform we launched about, when was May? Like 2-3 months ago. And it's basically designed to be the one-stop portal for aviatourism in South Africa. So we have this incredible map of the whole of South Africa with over 400 birding sites, all the relevant information. So like what birds to look out for, where to go, what are the habitats, what's the best time of year, time of day, entrance fees, gate opening hours, literally everything's on there. And then next to those birding spots are our recommended accommodations with the GPS pins. So you can find out exactly what are the best places to stay closest to the places you want to visit. And then the guides are on there as well. So who can you use? So Go Birding's sort of designed to be our one-stop platform for all of our aviatourism information that we have.
That's great. So to you out there, if you are looking to go birding, go to gobirding.co.za, contact Andrew, and of course, look at the Birdlife SA website. Thank you for your time, Andrew.
Thanks, Mongezi.
That was a really great conversation with Andrew de Block about the aviatourism program and how you can benefit from it, as well as how you can use it as a birder or as somebody who's interested in birds. So definitely look out for that on the website, as Andrew mentioned.
Yeah, and some great interviews with all the Birdlife staff. So from there, we then proceeded outside to the exhibits to chat to some of the exhibitors. And not all of the exhibitors were quite so accommodatingly set up to be able to feel comfortable chatting to a YouTube channel. So we didn't manage to interview all of the big optics manufacturers, but Zeiss were very keen and gracious to chat to us about their new lineup and some new binoculars that are shortly to be released. So yeah, let's have a listen to what they have to say. So we're chatting to the guys at the Zeiss stand at the African Bird Fair. Also one of the top 3 iconic and sought after brands of binoculars. So yeah, thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity, and overall it looks like a good turnout for the bird fair, for something that didn't happen in the last 2 years.
Yeah. You guys have quite a range. I mean, I know you have the top end really expensive stuff, but I think you also have, compared to some of the other top brands, you have some nice, more accessibly priced stuff.
Yes. So how our range works, maybe it's easier to have a look here at the back. We have our terrace, where our range starts for Zeiss. That will retail in around about a 10,000 rand price bracket for a 10x42.
Yeah.
So it's somebody starting with birding, but he does want to buy something better than just a normal one. Then it moves up to the Conquests. It's a stronger body, it's aluminium body, higher lens quality. Coatings on all of them are exactly the same.
Yeah.
Our complete range uses the same coatings. It's just the lens quality and what the build material for the bodies is that differs. Then it goes up to your Victory SFL, well not your SF, and your SFL has just been launched. It's going to be available in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
And that's just below our top end, which is the SF.
Yeah, and your 10x42 SF, if you want to call it your most aspirational Zeiss.
Our flagship is going to be about 44 to 45,000 in a retail store.
Okay, so sort of on par with the top binoculars price-wise. Yeah, awesome. And I know you guys have quite a range or you have spotting scopes at least.
Yeah, spotting scopes, our 2 most popular spotting scopes is the Garvia, and then we also have the Harpia, which is our flagship. So with the Harpia, you get it in 2 bodies, an 85mm body or a 95mm body, just depending on what use you have for it. IP stays the same. You can interchange it between the 2 bodies.
Okay, and I mean, kind of guide price on your scopes?
Harpia around about 70,000, and your Garvia is around about 32,000.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, good luck. I hope you guys have a lot of visitors on your stand, and thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity.
Those are really amazing toys and things to look out
Yes.
for by Zeiss. I definitely want myself one of those. Zeiss, if you're watching. So up next, we talk to a teenager who has started his journey into birding, enjoys birding, is a bird photographer himself, and it really talks to how early we can start developing birders or an interest in birding. One of the things that Sandiswa talks to is that birding shouldn't be seen as a thing for people of a certain age, a certain race, a certain demographic. It should be all-inclusive and all-accommodating. And this conversation we had with Luke really illustrates that point.
Yeah, and in fact, Luke, I think, has actually got more bird photographs on his photographic life list than I do. And he's a young teenager. So really inspiring to see what young people can achieve. Cool. So we're chatting with Luke, who has the envy of all of us, whose father actually works for Canon South Africa. We just spoke to Roger, his father. So I hear you also getting into your bird photography.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Getting the list up with lots of birds. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, how much stuff have you photographed? What's your photographic life list?
At least over 300 for just photographs.
Sure, that's impressive for such a young age. And what equipment are you using?
I normally use the R6 with the RF 800 f11.
Okay.
That one.
Yeah, as we heard, quite a nice little lens. And
Yeah.
you're finding it works well for you?
Works great. It's perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, since when or how long have you had an interest in birds?
It happened a couple of years ago. My sister was volunteering at some wildlife thing, but Marievale Bird Sanctuary was like down the road.
Yeah.
We started going there. I just got a camera put in my hands, and I just started from there and haven't stopped since.
Brilliant, awesome. Excellent. Well, yeah, it's good to see young people getting into birding and photography. So I'm sure we'll definitely see you around on social media at some point and follow your progress. And yeah, nice to see you taking photographs as well.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for chatting to us.
Cool, yeah. Sure.
And now the piece all of you bird photographers have been waiting for, and particularly for those of you with really deep pockets, because I have to be honest, it's an expensive game, this photography stuff.
Yeah.
So we have a chat to Roger Mason from Canon South Africa about the entire new mirrorless lineup, the lenses they've got. He even mentions some lenses that are close to R500,000 in value, plus some more affordable stuff in inverted commas, because photography is not an affordable pastime per se. But yes, let's have a listen to Roger, and let's look at all the lovely new toys that they had on offer at the fair. So we're at the Canon stand at the Bird Fair having a chat to Roger from Canon South Africa. Yes, Roger, thanks for talking to us.
How you doing? It's good to see you.
Likewise. I see you've got all the latest shiny toys here.
Absolutely, yeah. We brought our full mirrorless lineup. We've got the first R7s, the R10s in South Africa on display here, with everything from the entry-level 100, 400, 600 to the monster 1200 right here.
Awesome. And I mean, the R7 and R10, I mean, they've only been out, what, a couple of weeks or something, a couple of days?
Well, they were only announced at the end of May, so shipping and sales really started sort of middle of June, middle of July, I should say. So, yeah, about 2 weeks.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's quite a range.
Yeah.
I mean, for bird photographers, if they're not aspiring to like an R3 or the R1 when it comes out, where would you recommend they start?
Well, for absolute beginners, the R10 is incredible value for money. I mean, it's going to retail just below 20,000 rand. Yeah. You've got a crop sensor, which gives you 24 million pixels, more than 20 times a second, full high-def video, absolutely everything you could really need, and most importantly, the bird eye autofocus. I think for anybody thinking of moving to mirrorless, the decision should be about the autofocus before anything else. And the bird tracking autofocus is amazing. And again, this is why we're here with the targets on the wall down behind you.
Yes.
So you can actually see, even from a photograph, that it's able to lock on the bird, lock on its head, and in most cases find the eye as well.
Yeah, amazing. And I mean, your lens lineup, I see the RF lineup is growing in leaps and bounds really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, considering we only announced the RF lineup in 2018 for the first time, we're less than 4 years away, and we now have 30 lenses available. And the great thing is we've gone from both ends. So we have the crazy 400,000 rand, 1200mm here, but also the 100-400 entry-level lens, which is just over 10,000 rand. So the exciting part is that we have 800mm, which is what birders really, really want.
Yes.
And an 800mm traditionally, like this baby, you know, 300,000 bucks.
Yeah.
We now have an 800mm less than 20. And for birding, that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
And if you buy the 600 and you buy a small sensor like the R10 or the R7, the 600mm is about 11,000 rand. And on a crop sensor, that's giving you the 800. So for birders, my gosh, the time hasn't been better than now to switch from DSLR to mirrorless.
Yeah, no, exactly. And from what I've seen, even though that 800mm is an F11, birders don't seem to be struggling for light with it. I mean, it seems to perform brilliantly.
Absolutely. And there's two concerns about it. That F11 is not enough light to use. And we know that the overwhelming majority of people shooting birds in flight are often shooting above F8, F10, F11 anyway to get enough depth of field.
Yeah.
So F11 is quite usable. The latest cameras, the high ISO capabilities means where you were nervous about going over 400 before, now you should have no fear about going over 1600, 3200. So it's not a fear. The only other big fear that people have is depth of field. Oh, F11 is too much depth of field.
Yes.
But they're thinking F11 on a 200mm, that's about a meter. You know, F11 on an 800mm lens, when I'm shooting a bird on on those aloes down behind us, the depth of field is this.
Yeah.
Because the long lens compresses everything.
Yes.
So that shallow depth of field, those beautiful blur backgrounds, don't even worry about it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, if you really want those shallow depth of fields, you really want that low capabilities, it comes at a price, unfortunately.
Yes, no, exactly.
Yeah.
And I know, a lot of birders who've done their research know the answer to this, but for those that are worried about switching and not being able to use their old lenses on the mirrorless bodies?
Alrighty, don't even worry about it. The all of the old EF lenses fit and work on the new mirrorless system with the adapter.
Yes.
There's no optics in it. It is purely a spacer and it's purely an electronic transmission. And what you essentially have then is, as good as your lens was on your DSLR, it is as good on the mirrorless. The only thing that you do have is a slight drop in speed. So, for example, the R5 is designed for 20 pictures a second. 20 pictures a second on an RF lens is fantastic. The EF lenses were only designed up to about 16 frames a second.
Yeah.
So if you've got an old 100-400, fits and works absolutely perfectly, no saga whatsoever, autofocus, tracking, light, you name it, it's all there. The only thing is you're only going to get 16 frames a second out of that lens.
Yeah.
Only 16. I mean, if you're shooting a 7D2, you were at 10 frames a second anyway. So, oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with 16? You know, but when the cameras can do 20 or even 30, that is the only limitation.
Yeah. But as you say, it's not that big a sacrifice to not have to specifically go and buy new lenses if you've got.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is the thing, that adapter, when you buy the new R7 and the R10, for the first 6 months, that adapter is going to come free in the box.
Yeah.
We want to make it as smooth and as easy as possible for people to move into mirrorless. And you keep your existing lenses, and slowly but surely, you'll move over to the new RF lenses.
Yes.
The optical quality, the focus capabilities, all the benefits of the new mirrorless lenses make it worth their while. But you do it at your pace.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time and thanks for chatting to us.
Thanks very much for being here.
Yes. So yes, a huge thanks to Roger for having a chat to us and showing us all the lovely equipment. And whether it's the R10, 7, 3, 5, there's so many numbers and there's so many variations, but I'm definitely myself at some point in the next year or two going to switch to mirrorless. So it'll be keen from my side to start using mirrorless and see how it works for bird photography. But yeah, overall, I mean, the fair was great. We had a look at some of the most amazing optics, some of the most amazing products. There were some artists there doing some amazing work, some of the stuff that you can buy from the Birdlife shop. So there was a wide range of products. If you've never been to the bird fair before, definitely next year when it's on, you have to go if you're in the Joburg, Pretoria, Gauteng area and can make it to Birdlife offices. Mark did mention that they do a virtual fair as well, so you can attend virtually from anywhere in the world. So there's no reason why you can't attend the bird fair. And we'll be there next year again. And I hope as many of you watching this make a point, if you didn't go this year, to go to the bird fair next year. So yeah, those would be some of my highlights, is particularly the amazing optics and the artwork.
Yeah, I really like the amazing optics and the toys. Absolutely. I'm also looking forward to going mirrorless in the next couple of months, probably sooner, because some of those are really, really amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things I think we tend to forget, Doug, and you've worked in this space, you've even worked in this space, and you've written a book, but we tend to forget the importance of conservation when we go to these parks. And I think for me, it's a big reminder that outside of the bird parks and all these nature reserves being such great places, there are conservation efforts in the background that enable us to see all these beautiful birds that we love.
Yeah, hugely. And for me, and where it's particularly striking, is with all my bird call recording, and it is what I'm quite well known for. I've done several books. I've contributed to many of the apps with my bird call recordings. It's becoming strikingly obvious how many less birds there are out there to record. And more specifically, it used to be a lot easier to record because there were fewer cars, we didn't have the population density, there wasn't so much noise. I mean, to record these days is incredibly tricky to what it was 20, 30 years ago, just because of the volume of people. There's people, there's noise, there's pollution, there's invasion and encroachment on these natural areas everywhere.
Yeah, but of course, 20, 30 years ago, you were 21, as you are this year.
Exactly.
So I think, and one of the, there are many highlights of this season. This season of Birding Diaries also fell into winter, when there wasn't much birding to be had and to be done. But of course, we went to Maryvale, we went to Reed Flay, and a few other places where we saw some, and we even chased a rarity as well at some point.
Yeah, so the other interesting thing is this notion that winter is a dead time for birding. You know, particularly in Gauteng, and we did a specific episode where we went to Suikerbosrand and we chased some of the winter specials. Winter birding in Gauteng is definitely not boring. There's things that move into Gauteng you only get here in winter. And also, as we mentioned in the Maurivale episode, you get the water birds that aren't migratory tend to breed in winter so that their nests don't get flooded because they know that the water levels aren't going to rise. So wetland birding is very, very interesting and exciting, and you get to see all the young birds in winter. So winter's definitely not a dead time for Gauteng birding. And I think the other highlight for me of the season had to have been the Makubuskloof trip and the whole weekend frantically running around trying to and finally getting to see the Cape Parrots, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was amazing. I'm sad I missed that particular trip. And before we go into some of the things that we'll be looking into for the next season, one of the biggest things that's coming up in the next season, as a matter of fact, which is, I guess, a big announcement as we wrap up the season, is that we are doing Birding Big Day in December.
Yes, so we've got an exciting team together. I suppose not to nail our colours to the mast too excessively, but, you know, last year's team got 329. 14 years ago, everyone said 300 wasn't possible. And then I think it was Raiders of the Lost Lark were the first team to do 300. Now, a couple of teams are doing 300. So who knows? We've set ourselves a really ridiculous ambition to say, well, from 329 to 350 is only 21 more. Who knows? I don't know if it'll be us. I don't know if 350's breakable as a 24-hour challenge, but someone's got to give it a bash. So Absolutely. We're going to go all out for it.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us this season. Please subscribe, hit the notifications bell, follow the channel, because there'll still be new content coming up, even though it won't be Birding Diaries, but there'll still be content coming up on the channel. We've got some exciting collaborations coming up. We've got a few exciting conversations with leading birders, authors, and people within birding in South Africa and across the world.
Yeah, so all of those are to look forward to in the new season. Certainly the outings and the discussions and whatnot are an integral part of what we're doing with the Birding Diaries, and we'll bring you some exciting stuff and hopefully some new content. But as we say, between now and spring, when we launch season 2 of the Birding Diaries, we're going to be bringing you bird calls. We already have our collaboration on the go with Let's Go Birding, and an exciting project that we're not going to reveal too much about. It's in the wings from them that we're collaborating with. So we'll bring you bird calls, we'll bring you exciting stuff in the meantime. But yes, Simply Birding, and well, the Birding Diaries will be back in spring with an all new exciting season 2. And thanks for watching, and thanks for all the support so far in the seasons that we've done so far.
See you in the next season.
And see you out birding.